Ed Blundy's grandparents were farmers. His parents were not. Ed later met a woman, a long distance relationship of sorts. Well, she was a farmer. Ed married that farmer. It's like an agricultural version of some movie you see over the holidays on the Hallmark Channel, right? Just kidding, Ed. I am Dave Price. Now, Ed is a partner at Brown and Company in the United Kingdom. He is one of the firm's lead experts on renewable energy, and it is a topic we will explore with Ed in our conversation this week. Ed is also an expert on who is buying and who is selling farmland in the UK. We're going to get into that as well, but we're going to start by getting to know Ed. Let's start off with the big picture question. Why do you do what you do?
Oh, well, thank you, Dave. Good question. I suppose my story starts at the beginning. All of my grandparents were farmers. My parents weren't, so I didn't have the farm to inherit. They were the youngest children of their respective families, so they had to go and find their own way in the world. But I knew that, agriculture was the way I was going to go. And so it had always been part of my life. All of my friends and family, other than my parents, were involved in production ag. And so it was clear that's where I was going. I got quite heavily involved in young farmers movements locally in my village. And it became clear that when I left school, I was going to go straight to agricultural college and sort of focus on pure agriculture at that point. So I went off and did all of my agricultural qualifications. But what really frustrated me was at the end of each of my farm management lecturers, the lecturer would say something like, but you don't need to worry about that because that's what the land agents deal with. And then we'd close the session down and we'd go and talk about something else. And the bell would go and everybody would leave. And I would just be sat there thinking, what were they about to say? That sounded really interesting. What was that thing? How do I find out about that? And so I made a few inquiries and managed to get myself in a position in my undergrad degree course to study rural enterprise and land management, which answered all of those questions. During that time, I met my now wife, who is actually a farmer as well, herself. She's based down in South, or was at the time based down in South Lincolnshire when I wasn't. This is all down the eastern, but in the middle, down the eastern side of the UK. And so we had a decision to make about, does she come to me? Do I go to her? Do we find somewhere in the middle? And it became pretty clear because of her responsibilities that I was going to go to her. And so that's what happened. I then actually got a job, my second job. I sort of had a job as part of my studies. You have a year or 18 months on the job as part of my degree. So that was my first surveying job. The second one was actually in the village where my parents live, and I thought, this is fantastic, I've nailed this. But then moved 50 miles away to sort of be with my wife, now wife, and so I ended up having an hour and 15-minute commute either way to go to the job I was doing. So that didn't last very long. I say not very long, it was 4 years. But I was involved at that point in sort of traditional estate management, looking after property for absentee landowners largely. And so I wanted to get back to a more agricultural focus. And so I had a quick look around and realized that there was really only one specialist rural firm that focused on ag in my part of the world, and that was Brown and Co. So I moved there soon after, became a partner in 2015, and now have the privilege of sort of leading my division of land agents. There's 100 and something of us. And so that's the story. That's the backstory and why we're here.
So then and you're part of this, you're part of the inaugural part of the International Ag Alliance. How did you and why did you then look globally as opposed to just focusing on land at home?
So Brown & Co has been active internationally for nearly 30 years, almost since its inception, to be honest. We won various government contracts in the Caribbean and in Poland. They were the first two ventures. And so both of those were on the back of instructions to go and acquire farms in those places, certainly in Poland. And so we we bought a farm and then we bought another farm and then another and started to manage them. And it became quite obvious fairly early that what we needed was a local presence and to open an office and to base somebody there permanently to drive it and grow it and see what comes next. So that happened in the late 90s, I think. And I think, well, that's my colleague, Adam Oliver, who you may be in touch with soon. And you'll be fascinated by that story. But that sort of set the scene with our work internationally. And from that base, we then did a lot of work in Central and Eastern Europe. The Caribbean contract was a government-led contract evaluation project, which spread over a number of the Caribbean islands. And so once we gained a foothold there, that then inevitably led to contacts being grown and developed in North America and South America. And a few of the people from my colleagues from other offices have spent a long time down in South America in particular. And so our international activities have been part of Brown & Co. almost from day one. And so the opportunity to collaborate with other people doing what we do in different parts of the world, but who don't necessarily have their own individual people in different jurisdictions, just made sense to identify who those people were, get together, sort of go for a beer and talk about it and see what happens. So that's what happened. And yeah, the International Ag Alliance was formed formally this year, but it's been kicked around for a couple of years now. And simply with the objective of delivering the best possible service to clients in the world. And now we can say that because we are based all around the world. Specialist service with a lot of dedicated individuals. It's not just one person in a firm giving it a go in different places. This is some serious bandwidth and capacity on offer. So we're really excited about it, and it's already sort of delivered a few results. And so yeah, looking forward to seeing where it's going to go next.
All right, specifically about farmland in the UK, who is buying right now?
Good question. I think the market at the moment is still dominated by the tax buyer, even though there's been lots of tax changes mooted, and we're going to wait to see what happens in April insofar as inheritance tax is concerned. We still have rollover relief from capital gains tax. And so if you are a farmer or landowner and you have a non-agricultural project, either a renewables project or a development project, and you sell land and end up with a bunch of capital, that is protected from capital gains if you roll it over into a qualifying asset within 3 years. You can go a year back or 3 years forwards. And so most of those people are looking for new land to replace the land they sold as part of whatever project they were involved in. So there are still a lot of those sorts of people in the market buying land. There are still a few inheritance tax buyers, bizarrely. If you are not in agriculture and you look at buying farmland and can get 20%, a 20% tax instead of 40%, then that's 50% better than the alternative. And so there are some people still now from outside of the sector looking at farmland as an asset class, thinking, okay, so I can still shelter some of the wealth from tax. So still a few of those buyers, even though it's probably not going to be as good as it was. A few UK institutions are still buying. National Grid is buying a bit. The Crown Estate, a few UK pension funds and charitable trusts are buying land. The big question is the local farmer buying land? And not so much would be the answer. Some of them are, yes. Some of them are well capitalized and have not spent everything they've earned over the last few years when times have been really good. And so people in areas where they've not been able to buy land and expand have got the cash to buy. Those who are having to look at borrowing to fund those acquisitions is a different story, because then it's all about confidence. Yes, rates have gone up from 0.12, it peaked at 5.25, they're now down to 4 base rate. But still that requires some recalibration to get your head around the fact, hang on, for the last 10 years, I've been able to borrow at nothing.
Yeah.
Now it's going to cost me 5% or 4%.
Yeah, wait a minute.
Plus the margin.
Yeah.
That's been a psychological hurdle for a lot of people. I think they had just about overcome that, but now we've got the perfect storm of low commodity prices, agflation, a drought followed by a dry winter last year. So this winter really needs to be a wet one. Loss of government support, the closure of the replacement sort of subsidy schemes. Now the family farm tax, the migration away from ag of the next generation. There's a whole bunch of factors leading to some farmers saying, what's the point? Is it worth it? Do I really want to go and borrow another £1 million, £2 million, 100,000, whatever it is, when I'm worried about serviceability, and I'm just going to increase the capital value of my asset, which is going to be taxed. So we face the farmer buyer faces a bit of a challenge at the moment. For sure.
You were mentioning the psychological aspect of borrowing rates, and is it primarily the younger folks who saw that decade of cheap borrowing that they have more difficulty getting over the hurdle? Or is it even the folks who've been around for a while and just got conditioned to those lower rates?
Certainly that latter group. But of course, the average age of a farmer in the UK is 60 something. So there aren't many of the younger generation actually around to have a view on it. But certainly, yeah, those who entered the industry, post-COVID, who have only known rates on the floor, well, 500% increases are difficult to get your head around. But they take advice that those who are in the industry, that there are some really, really good people in this industry. There's no doubt about that, and so they get it. And the appetite for risk, for the right thing in the right place at the right time, is still there. It tends to be the probably of our bell curve. It's the middle. It's the 80%. That's where the challenges are. There will always be people at the top, the elites, who absolutely get it. They'll be fine. Maybe there'll be people at the other end who do need to have a long, hard think, and maybe there will be some people exit the industry. And I suspect that is inevitable one way or another.
Here in the States, we are fixated on President Trump's global trade policy as it relates to tariffs, and it's just constant state of change. A threat, is it really going to be this? Then he comes down, all over the place. So it's very, very difficult to do any kind of planning, whether short-term, medium, or long-term, frankly. And perhaps you all in the UK aren't, you're not really in his crosshairs necessarily as some other places are. But how does that come into play?
Yeah, I think we're relatively unaffected. We got hit with 10% reciprocal, so it's better than it could have been. And we've got various exemptions and thresholds for certain commodities and sectors of our economy that means we'll probably be okay. But yeah, it's what can we say? Yeah, we're better off than most, I suppose, because what we produce here in the UK doesn't necessarily affect world prices. Take grains just for instance. We don't produce enough to have a huge impact. The tariffs, a bit like exchange rates, really. It's all about whether you're exporting or importing, and it's a balance. So whilst changes might affect those people who want to buy a lot of their inputs, and that gets affected, well, on the flip side of that coin, it's helping somebody else who wants to export something. So yeah, I don't know. I guess we're a fan of the trade deal. We'd much rather remove all of the viscosity and the friction from trade around the world. And it depends which sector you're in. Like I say, grains difficult. A lot of what we produce in the UK is fresh produce. It's local markets. We're producing food, certainly down the eastern side of the country here with our vegetable and brassica and potato production. It's all pretty much supplying ourselves anyway. So I guess that insulates us a little bit. Tariffs at the moment are just not something that we're losing a lot of sleep over in the ag sector in this particular part of the UK in particular.
How do folks follow our politics here? Is it spectator sport? I just now my relatives going back several generations. We have to go back about three, but
Okay.
most of them are from the UK. But I think of I just still have this romanticized view of the UK where everybody is stately and proper and even keeled and unemotional. That
You'd
would
be surprised.
those words would not describe the day-to-day tendencies of the current president, and he was not elected to be that in the United States. That's not his personality. So, how do people follow our politics?
Yeah, interesting. Spectator sport probably sums it up. Um, you know, we sit and observe. I listen to a lot of political podcasts and economic
Hmm.
podcasts, and of course, all anybody talks about is your president.
Hmm.
And I think that he would view that as a success.
Sure.
He's won because he's setting the agenda. He's talking about everything. I love the sort of taco label that he's been given. That Trump always chickens out. So he announces all of these tariffs, and then, as you say, he reverses them, and it might be something completely different the week
Hmm.
after. The markets seem to have got that priced in now into the stock market in particular, um, and so yeah, it is quite bizarre. But it is in the context of what's going on domestically here as well. We've had 7 prime ministers in the last 5 minutes, it seems. Um, we've shifted colour from the Conservative Party to the Labour Party, and the
Hmm.
Conservative Party, I think, basically self-destructed because of all the infighting. Just as we've got some stability, there would be a civil war, and they'd oust that prime minister and get a new one,
Hmm.
and everything was designed to be fine. In the end, that led to the end of that particular administration, so we replaced it with another one, and now there are signs that it's going down exactly the same road. So yeah, we've got our own sort of issues here. Um, what you guys are doing in the States, yeah, he's certainly, he's certainly been a disruptor, and so sometimes that leads to change. It accelerates change. It creates innovation. It forces people to think differently and think outside the box. And what would we do in these situations? You have to start writing a playbook to say, well, if this happens, we can do that. If this happens, we'll do that. And you cover all bases. And so maybe that leads to some better governance in a lot of organizations because you have to think about what you would do in different circumstances. Um, yeah, it's fascinating. Yes, what international investors want, of course, is a bit of geopolitical stability. They're
Sure.
looking for when they've got a mandate to deploy capital wherever they wish. High up the list is where is politically stable. Where can we tick off another line entry of risk and focus on other things? Um, and so that doesn't help.
Well, part of the disruption with him since since he has returned to office is in the renewable space, and that is an expertise of yours and has been for quite some time. Could you talk specifically about renewables in the UK trend wise? What's happening there?
That's a great question. Thank you. So since if I go back to probably I did my first solar farm deal probably in 2010 or just before then. We had a new raft of subsidies. Um, the first sort of on the back of the Kyoto agreements and the first COP agreements where people started to think about the whole subject of global warming and climate change and
Hmm.
have we got a problem here? Are there any correlations between what we're doing and what the temperature readings seem to be suggesting? So this nascent industry of renewable energy was born, and as always happens, a bunch of innovators grasped hold of that nettle and started to think, okay, well, how can we make some money out of this? I know, let's go and rent a field and fill it full of solar panels, get them registered and claim the subsidy. And there was a gold rush for that, for sure, limited to 5 megawatts, which is about 30 acres. But for those farmers involved, the rents back then were probably 1,500 to £2,000 an acre, subsidy driven. But for a struggling farmer who was maybe looking at earning 100 or two an acre, otherwise by farming it, it was a bit of a no-brainer, and it was a great lifeline for some diversification. Um, And leading up to that point, it had all been about onshore wind. And onshore wind was getting so difficult to get planning permission for because you could see it. And so the theory was that we'll go solar because it's below hedge height, and as long as it's in the right place, you won't be able to see it. So it removes the planning problem. So everybody rushed into solar, and there have been some, there's been a lot of solar deals done over the last 10 years. They started to include battery storage as well because the two became complementary.
Sure.
Whilst the offshore wind sector was ballooning, and great things are happening in the offshore sector. When Boris Johnson was our Prime Minister here, he sort of declared that it was his intention for the UK to be powered by offshore wind by 2050, I think, which was fair enough. There was a big resource out there in the North Sea, and it's shallow, so it's quite easy to build. But we've got to get there. And so solar was seen as the way to fill the gap, I think. It was easy and relatively cheap to deploy field scale solar, and a lot of it quickly for relatively inexpensive money. And so that happened, and a lot of deals had been done. All of those were being connected into the lower voltage electrical grid. And so there was capacity in that grid, and now all of a sudden it's full. So there's no capacity in the relatively low voltage, sort of 11 or 33,000 volt lines. So developers then had to find ways to continue in business, and the only way they could do that was to start applying to connect these solar farms into the transmission network, which is sort of 132, 275, 400 kV lines. Very expensive to connect into, huge sort of grid costs. And so the only way to keep the cost per megawatt of your installation viable was to have lots of megawatts to sort of divide the cost by a big number. So that sort of led to the birth of the very large scale solar farm, the nationally significant infrastructure project. So the 2, 3, 4,000 acre solar farm.
Is that your last one?
And of course, what that has led to now is sort of some social question marks over the impact that's going to have on societies, the landscape, and people generally. Is that too much? So that's the debate at the moment. It seems in certain parts of the country that there isn't a field left that isn't under option for solar. And so if they all happen, then there will be a lot of solar in certain parts of the country. I think collectively it will still be less than the amount of land taken up by golf courses, for instance. So it's not necessarily a case of we're losing all of this land from food production.
Sure.
Of course, we will be, but it's not permanent and it's not total. You can still graze underneath if you want to.
Exactly.
But I think solar has probably now reached the end of its sort of time. Storage has as well. There's enough storage in gestation now, and now all of the focus is back on onshore wind again, because with the big turbines, and they're really big turbines, obviously you can produce the same amount of power as a lot of acres of solar without losing the land from food production. So if you can get over the visual impact, then, and I think you probably can, then I see another 5-10 years of onshore wind again. And then that will sort of lead into whatever comes next with nuclear reactors.
So
because I think nuclear will solve everybody's problem.
was a lot of this growth, and does this continue to be this case, that it's environmentally why folks were looking at this? In the States, to me as an outsider looking specifically at wind and solar, this brought some financial opportunities for, I'm in Iowa, kind of in the middle of the country, and as is the case in a lot of places across our country, our smaller communities are getting smaller population-wise as people lack opportunities that they need there and they go find it elsewhere. And so you're left with shrinking and shrinking and shrinking population base. And wind and solar, as from an outsider's point of view, seem to offer some financial possibilities for these folks, right? And then they are dealing with some of the same arguments that you are with solar. Do we want to cover the land with this? And in Iowa, most of the land is pretty good. very fertile. Some other parts of the country, maybe not so much. And with wind, that seemed to be a potential for a while. Now we are seeing a lot of change in the conversation, perhaps as we've transitioned from a Democratic president to now Donald Trump, who does not like that wind turbine by his golf course in Scotland. He
Yep.
makes that's clearly not a secret, and he
Yeah.
has said all kinds of anti-wind comments over the time, and the aesthetics of it perhaps or something. But there's also if you're driving right through the middle of our state in Iowa, it's very peaceful to watch
Yeah.
the blades turn as the sun
Mhm.
is coming up or the sun is going down. So
Mhm.
do you feel that solar then is sort of where it's going to be for a while, and there's this the focus will be on wind, and you mentioned nuclear, but wind is kind of where it's going to be?
I think so, because I think that's the answer to the land use conflict question.
Okay.
As these solar farms got so big and get so big, and very few of the big ones have actually been built yet. There's quite a few that have been consented there, but there's still a long way to go post consenting to get all your funding and ordering of the infrastructure and the equipment and getting it delivered and then appointing the teams to actually go and build the thing. It's still a long way away. Um, but undoubtedly, it will require a lot of land if they all get built. We need the power. I don't think that's in question at all. We definitely need the power. Nobody enjoyed all the power price spikes post Ukraine invasion.
Hmm.
That got a lot of people thinking, okay, we need to do something about it. We had a Chancellor of the Exchequer in 2000 who said no to signing off a new nuclear power station back then because he said, what's the point? It won't be ready until 2020 if I do. Well, now we know why he should have done it. And solar and wind can be deployed relatively quickly. It takes you 20, 25 years to deliver a new nuclear power station. Wind and solar can be done quickly, so it fills that gap. But yes, people have now started to think, well, there's too much land being turned over to solar. It's affecting too many people. And even though they are really, really well designed, and you can't see that many of them, I'm involved in a lot of the design of a lot of them. I don't design them myself, but I'm part of the conversation. And I know how much effort goes into making sure they are policy compliant, that all the consultations happen, people engage with local communities and say, well, what if I do this? What if I do that? How can I make this better for you? You're the folks living next to it. So all of that happens, but it is still Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. If you are a landowner and you get the opportunity to land on your doormat, then you love it because it's possibly the savior of the farm.
Hmm.
It creates some tax problems that you have to navigate your way through, but ultimately, if you are successful in having a project delivered on the farm, then the rental income is very, very welcome. It's long term, index linked, inflation hedged, unearned income, relatively risk free income for a long
Hmm.
period of time. So yeah, those people who are against it tend not to be being offered one, if you know what I mean. But it's such a delicate line to tread. But as is the case with all development in the UK, we have a lot of people and not much space, and so the possibility and opportunity for conflict and differences of opinion is everywhere. So yeah, all good fun trying to manage it. But I do think wind has probably got more of a future. We'll spend the next 5 years. We'll be building out these solar farms that have been consented and those going
Hmm.
through the process. But all the deals that are being done now are for new onshore turbines.
Okay. All right. So we're talking as 2025 is winding to a close. What piques
Hmm.
your attention as you look ahead to 2026?
First of all, I want some rain this winter. Um, November has been very wet, above average rainfall in November, which is the
Okay.
first month for probably 12. So that's good. It's been snowing today, which is slightly weird, but the weather has changed. Beyond that, it's all about commodity prices. For people, we've just got to see some improvements there. Um, we're all eyes on what's going to happen in the budget later this month, and then of course seeing whether the proposals for April with the inheritance tax policies are enacted, and then we have to sit and wait and see what happens with people making decisions to sell or go big, or if everybody sells, if there really are some big impacts, then will that result in lots more land onto the market? What's that going to do for land prices? Are we going to have any buyers? There's just so many potential ways it might go. There are quite a lot of tax conferences taking place between now and the Christmas, really, to sort of take one final holistic view on where we're going. But yeah, tax, weather, commodity prices, land market, and then obviously, I mean, we've done however long we've been talking, and we haven't mentioned AI once yet.
Yeah.
So then AI is linked to the energy piece, because if AI and crypto goes where we all think it might, then we're going to need, more power than we can shake a stick at, which is why I mentioned modular nuclear fusion reactors, because that obviously is the solution. That actually brings a lot of other problems with abundance. And if everybody has abundant free energy, then what does that do socially? If everybody can have everything they want, but that's another question. So yeah, I suppose that's what we're looking at, really. But I, with all of the problems that are going on, I still think the conclusion is that we have a sense of optimism. When you talk to people individually, if you talk to people collectively, how is the next 12 months going to be? Oh, it's a disaster, all these problems. How's it going to be for you personally? Oh, I'll be fine. I've got this to do and that to do. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. That's what everybody's saying personally, but collectively, it's the end of the world. So we've got to try and sort through that and see what the truth is.
Outstanding. Ed, thank you so much. Fascinating to talk to you. Really appreciate the insights and conversation.
Not at all. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, and hopefully we can do it all again sometime.
Yes, sir. We would look forward to it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Brown & Company, Brown & Co., it's part of the International Ag Alliance. It's a global coalition of agricultural land and business firms. It unites Ed's company along with People's Company, an Iowa-based firm in the United States, as well as LAWD in Australia. You can learn more about the International Ag Alliance and Ed Blundy in the American Farmland Owner newsletter. It's free, comes out every Friday, and if you want, you can sign up and have it sent right to your inbox to read whenever it's convenient for you. Go to AmericanFarmlandOwner.com and see what it's all about. Thanks for joining us here on the American Farmland Owner podcast, and thanks for caring about the future of our farmland.